Welcome back, everyone. Pal Ponder on Weather here. In this update, we've got a lot of heat that's really building across the lower US, but to the north, we've got a series of mesoscale convective systems that'll be racing across that boundary, producing damaging winds, some larger hail, and some isolated tornadoes over the next several days. So there's four areas of concern this afternoon. There's areas of like spin in the upper levels of the atmosphere. One was going to be draped across portions of Idaho and Montana back into Wyoming. There's another piece of energy that's coming through the Dakotas. There's a third piece of energy that's actually coming through northern portion of Wisconsin. And there's a fourth piece of energy that's really elongated across the East Coast. And all those are going to be bringing some damaging winds and some larger hail. And there's going to be some embedded isolated tornadic spin ups within that zone. And it's all fueled by very intense high dew points. I mean, anything essentially 70 or higher is considered oppressive. Man, look at that map, guys. Most of the eastern 2/3 of the US is locked in just kind of a soupy air mass. And especially if you live further to the north, some of these areas in the high 70s, there's even some 80s showing up on the map. So gosh, that is a lot of fuel that's going to be injecting into those supercells, and that's what's going to be making them so dangerous. And obviously underneath that, there's going to be a lot of heat. Those higher dew points combined with the temperature is going to make the heat index soar to well over 100 degrees. In fact, it's clocking in at 113 at 2 o'clock this afternoon in portions of Illinois. So widespread 100s across this region. And so we'll be looking at these convective complexes are going to be originating along this zone. So even for today, they did in fact upgrade this to an enhanced risk back into the Duluth region. That does include portions of Minneapolis back into La Crosse, does include portions of Marquette, even into Green Bay and towards Milwaukee. And then there's that second piece of energy that's highlighted along the East Coast. This East Coast has got very rare excessive heat warnings. Some of these heat indices are in the 105, 110 range before these strong thunderstorms are going to be impacting this area, and definitely can't roll out an isolated tornado within the Providence region, back into the Boston region, up here into Concord, even into Portland. So, I mean, definitely be on high alert later on this afternoon into the early evening time frame in that region. So let's break this thing down for you. This is what the radar could possibly look like about 8 o'clock tonight, with these isolated supercell thunderstorms over the St. Cloud region, coming out of Duluth, heading towards Minneapolis, back into Ironwood here. These are going to be packing some 60, 65, likely some 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts with these. Could be some quarter pockets of ping pong, maybe even some golf ball size hail out of these supercells, and these will continue to be racing across. And then that secondary piece of energy that's also going to be impacting the East Coast right around, this is around 6 o'clock this evening. We're looking at more isolated activity, but where you see that isolated activity, those are definitely going to be packing a punch, especially with those higher dew points and that high water content value in that region. So definitely be on high alert. We could be looking at some microburst winds, some downburst winds, and this is the same area that could see an isolated tornadic spin up. So I wouldn't be surprised several tornado warnings to be impacted by the 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock time frame. So heading into tomorrow, you can see where the high pressure is, folks. It's really, we got two big domes of high pressure across the lower portions of the US, and it's just really to the north. It's this same boundary, folks. This high pressure is just locked into this region. So we've got a lot of sinking air, a lot of heat, and some areas, entire states are just begging for rain. And unfortunately, they're just not going to get it. So this is a pretty intense heat wave coming for the southern plains. So here's the setup heading into tomorrow. Is yes, we have another series of convective complexes are going to be racing across. These we're going to be moving a little bit further south because we are going to have a little bit of a backdoor trough that's going to be coming in from Canada. That's going to shift the jet stream just a tad bit further south. So it could pushing, say out of the Marquette region and push it further south into, say, the Milwaukee region. back into the Des Moines, back into Chicago region. I do feel this is likely going to be upgraded to an enhanced risk, especially near the Chicago region as we get closer to tomorrow. So definitely be on high alert for these storms as well. Those will be impacting Detroit, back into the Cleveland region, and those will be shifting off into the East Coast as well. But there's where the heavier pockets of rain. We've got that tropical low down here in Florida. They're still getting in some afternoon isolated shower activity with that tropical low. But we have seen some improvement for the desert Southwest. The monsoon has been basically non-existent so far this season, and we have seen some bubble up thunderstorms within this region. In fact, it was actually enough to drop Phoenix to 89 degrees, and that's the first time they've actually been below 90 in 16 days, folks. It's been crazy hot down in there. And definitely some welcome rain in and around those regions with the some sort of monsoonal flow is showing hints on the table that producing those scattered isolated thunderstorms. So here's the wind aspect from these storms. It's going to be some high impact damaging winds, easily 60, 70, but likely some maxing out over 80 miles an hour, especially within this zone. And especially that's why I feel like this northern Illinois is going to be upgraded tomorrow for an enhanced risk, because we've got these damaging winds. You're going to be scrolling across with this mesoscale convective system and the peak heating of the afternoon. And then we have that other boundary coming through out of Detroit, pushing into northern portions of Ohio and heading into western portions of Pennsylvania, fishtailing down to the DC area, back into Delaware, into the later evening time frame on your Friday. But overall, for the next 48 hours, so there's the tropical low down here where you see the reds. That's the most intense rains. This is where the radar kind of maxes out, where you could best possibly see the heaviest rain probabilities over the next 2 days. And really the highest concern as far as heavier rain, maybe some isolated flash flooding, would be central and northern portions of Wisconsin, back into the Great Lakes region, heading into the far northern regions of Illinois, back into portions of northern Indiana and Ohio here, and then fishtailing down here into portions of West Virginia, further south into Florida, and yes, any rain they can speak of down here in the desert Southwest and portions of Arizona and New Mexico. They will greatly take it in a big way, because it has just been bone dry in that region. But like I mentioned, we do have that backdoor trough, so we are going to be heating up big time in the next couple of days for the Northeast and New England. But that cools down significantly as we head into the weekend, especially into early next week. We're going to be looking at temperatures in the 70s, folks. It's going to be feeling really nice up here in these neck of the woods. Morning lows in the 50s. While further south, you're going to be begging for those 70s, because you're not going to get it. You're going to be getting widespread triple digits. And there's that tut low. This is a tropical trough, and known as kind of a tut low further off to the south. That's going to be pushing into the Pacific region. Not going to really bring much rain with it, per se, at least push into the desert Southwest, but it's probably going to be enough to actually drop Phoenix below the crucial 110 barrier, which they have not seen in about 26, 27 days. So I think the streak ends this weekend. The low streak ended last night, but the 110 plus streak's probably going to be ending by Saturday, especially by Sunday. But there's the setup for Saturday. That convective complex will be continue to move off into the east. So those are going to be highlighting those areas again as the backdoor trough pushes a little bit further south. That elongates this area, pushing a little bit further south as well. So now it definitely includes portions of West Virginia, getting into the Virginia region. And it does include the DC area, back into New Jersey, into New York City, and all the way up to Boston, heading into Saturday afternoon. So there's the setup going into Sunday. So this pushes just a tad bit further south, and that's probably about as far south as it's going to get. So if you do live on the northern periphery of this zone in the blue shaded areas, you're going to be experiencing temperatures in the 70s, if not in the 80s, for high temperatures. Going to be feeling really nice. Morning lows 50s and 60s. Further south, that just compresses the heating even more. So that's going to take a notch upward. And you've been seeing some triple digits, but you're going to be seeing in the mid triple digits, even some of the high triple digits, especially as we get into Monday and Tuesday afternoons, because as the high just parks over the southern plains, it just intensifies. These areas haven't seen rainfall in weeks. The ground is super dry by now. High fire dangers, and that dry ground heats up in a big way. In fact, Dallas could be warmer than Phoenix on Monday and Tuesday, if you can believe that. 108, 109, possibly 110 degrees within Oklahoma region, within North Texas, East Texas, Louisiana, maybe even to Kansas, feeling that big time triple digit heat. And underneath that, a lot of sinking air, folks. So as the high is really parked over the central part of the U.S., that opens the door, especially with that tut low coming in further south. That's going to at least open the door for opportunities for isolated pockets of rain showers. And that's why I feel definitely by then the temperatures will be below, likely probably in the mid 100s in the Phoenix region. And that will push into portions of Utah, extending into portions of Colorado. And the same deal happens on Tuesday, right? So as the high continues just to expand and dominate the middle of the country, that puts the openness and opens the door for this southerly flow off the Pacific, and has more of a monsoonal flow associated with it. So you're going to be taking advantage of this, because I don't think it's going to last that long. I think the real intense heat definitely comes back by the end of the week. But gosh, folks, I mean, further south, Oklahoma, Kansas, Arkansas, Louisiana, especially Texas, it's just bone dry. Everybody's begging for rain down there and just not going to get it. And the longer they stay dry, the higher they're going to get. And that's exactly, this is the hottest time of the year. And we're going into August, and so it's going to feel every bit of it. And so here's the open door. Here's where the rain probabilities are going to be for the next 7 days. So everything's really highlighted on the northern periphery of that ridge, and then further south you have that tropical low into Florida. But I've been trying to look for a relief, right? There's, trying to look for a relief, and it just, unfortunately, it's just not going to get it. Every update continues to have this ridge likely dominating a good part of the south, the deep south. It puts the warmest, deepest, highest, even the hottest temperatures of the summer still draped across these regions. It still puts the cooler air across the extreme portions of the northern plains, upper Midwest, upper Great Lakes, back into New England region. And that would put the storm track further to north, right? So if you got the high pressure locked underneath to the south, that puts the storm track to the north, with that northwest flow. So these storms kind of originate in Idaho and Montana and portions of Wyoming, and as they push from northwest to east southeast, they tap into that drier air, right? So you can squeeze out precipitation, but the further south you live, it's not going to be hitting the ground. It's going to be drying up in those higher levels of the atmosphere. And that water is just going to be evaporated once it hits that heat dome across the southern plains. And out in the tropics, there's really not much help either, right? I mean, the waters are plenty warm, but that's only one element. In fact, the National Hurricane Center has another piece of energy they're watching, 40% probability. The last two kind of fizzled out. And even if this one does come to fruition, all signs indicate it's well out into the open waters of the Atlantic and becomes a fish storm. So if we look at the precipitation amounts out in the Caribbean for the next 10 days, we see these active tropical waves. There's not much shear off this area. There is some Saharan dust, but there's a lot of heavier rain. So there's likely going to be a series of these coming off the African coast. But once they get closer in this environment, most of them tend to push further north into become fish storms, especially like this next one. And if they try to push further south, they get pushed further south. So this whole area into the Caribbean has just a ton of shear. It has a ton of shear, and actually even some Saharan dust. So you notice there's actually not that much activity within the heart of the Caribbean, and actually in the heart of the Gulf of Mexico. Everything is pushed further south, away from the main regions of the Caribbean. So guys, I appreciate you guys watching. I do like this video. Definitely hit the subscribe button and catch the next update while I protect you before and after storm.